So this week's episode of Blade the Immortal was an interesting one to say the least. The first, give or take 3/4 of the episode, was actually not focused on our central two leads, but rather focusing in on basically the groups that we've been hunting or those who seem to be pursuing them. And it was an interesting direction just because it was like so back and forth, and this is, I would say, probably the first time that I felt like the pacing has been a little off for myself, just because until we started focusing more on like Taito and things like that, characters that we've seen longer than a few seconds as they either kill someone or something like that, I felt like obviously it was interesting to see all the different personalities, the different looks, the different characters, seeing who they're killing, how they're killing them, and just getting a little glimpse, a little taste of their personality before we actually get fully introduced to them, however many episodes down the line. But it definitely did feel like we were just kind of like skim reading to then get to the main punchline, which was Taito in this episode, which wasn't a bad thing because I love this character. He's so ominous, he's so mysterious, and you don't really know where his character is going to go. So once it really got into that content, and then obviously focusing back in our central two leads and where they were going with an introduction of a new character who was just batshit insane, it definitely got the ball moving. But for a little bit there in the start, I was feeling like, yeah, I can sort of agree with the mass opinion that the pacing feels iffy. That is, until it started getting into more central focused characters, which was really, really nice. I do want to thank anyone who has been commenting on these videos, these reviews that I do for Blade the Immortal. Comments are my favorite thing about making videos, and even if a video only gets like 300 or 400 views, I would still think more than a couple of people would comment, but it seems like not a lot of people are discussing Blade the Immortal. Last week I had a really nice back and forth with one of my subscribers, so I do appreciate it if you are some of the people who actually do take time into your day to comment, have a conversation with me about series like this. I know it's not directly related to this, but I just want to say thanks because, you know, these videos, they take a little bit of time to make, so it's kind of unfortunate when I make them and then like only one person comments. So I do want to make sure people know, like, I do encourage you to comment because it is a very fun thing for me. Just wanted to say that because I do hope more people will start participating in the comments, because even if you're kind of neutral on this series, even if you're neutral on Blade the Immortal, I'd love to hear your thoughts just because it is fun to see a lot of different opinions on any series in general. But with that out of the way, I do want to say most of what I want to discuss is more related to the Taito as well as kind of our central characters content, more so on Taito because he's such an interesting character, especially with where he was going in this episode and how he was starting to kind of distance himself and wanting to maybe set foot into a new path in life. And the best part of this episode, without a doubt for me, was the prostitute and just her story. It's very clear what happens to women who sell themselves in kind of this era where you don't usually get a happy ending. I can think back to series like Dororo and just, you know, all those other series. It's like, it doesn't end very well too often. But even though I had a very strong suspicion that this girl was going to meet a very tragic end, I didn't know how tragic until I saw it, but still, it was a very interesting human touch. You have someone who seemingly is starting to drop his blade and maybe distancing himself, and you have a girl who, basically from her dialogue, seems that every time that she was around him, she would say she was cold and he would sleep with her, but he would never touch her. Even though she was a girl who sold her body for pleasure, he would never do that, and it just kind of gives you an open window to this man's psyche, and just it makes you start questioning if maybe he does have more than just killing intent in his body, and maybe he is someone who values more actual connections or something like that. But it was still interesting to watch it play out and how she was just hoping that, you know, I'm doing this because I'm trying to get medicine for my mother, but she's only going to live for 2 more years. I just want to own a house. I want to be with someone who I care for, and you can clearly tell what man she wants that to be, but she also understands that he's a swordsman, right? He has to walk his own path, and she could just kind of lets him go, but he says, I'll visit you from time to time. That's when it's like, oh yeah, this girl's definitely dying. I just didn't know what I wanted out of that back and forth, and that I think is why I found it so enjoyable, because it was just so different. It was such a human touch against such, you could even say, disgusting characters in a lot of ways, minus the girl, because even though she was selling herself, there's nothing wrong with that. It's more so the time period of why you definitely wouldn't want to do that, because you'll end up getting killed by a samurai either for fun or because he wants to do something to hurt another, right? And it was so interesting to see that parting ways and then transitioning to other characters who just doesn't even bat an eye after what they did, and just having to watch her like pull her hand off of the ground with a blade stuck in it and just her crying out Taito's name. It's like, it was such a Blade of the Immortal moment, and that's why I love it so much, is that this girl, we got introduced to her and then she's dead, right? she isn't all that important in the grand scheme of things, you might say, unless Taito really gets worked up because of her death. But still, it's that little moment that just shows you the brutality, the ferocity of this time period, of the characters that we're hunting, and it just made me feel a lot of different things. And I love those moments in Blade of the Immortal where it really gets that gut reaction. Nothing that you're like overly looking at with a critical eye. You're like, okay, what's this going to relate to for the plot, and how's this going to evolve a character? Just the gut reaction. And I think just with their use of blood and carnage, they really get a nice gut reaction out of you where you, at multiple points, at least I know I do, feel quite disgusted. And that's exactly what you want in a series like this. You want to feel disgusted at the brutality of blades going through bodies, or just the atrocities that they'll commit towards families and women and just the men, and just how it's all apparently for honor, but you don't know where that honor eventually will lead. And then how they naturally transition back to our central characters. And I wasn't sure, like, what was the point of this? Like, I honestly thought the entire episodes would be dedicated to a different perspective, and then we cut back and it's just like, you know, Rin's wanting to train harder, and obviously she's not going to be able to do it overnight. They're eating, it's pretty comfy stuff. I was like, what's the point, right? What's ultimately the point of showing us this to end off an episode when we've already had plenty of moments like this? So I'll be honest, I was definitely caught off guard when it did transition to this man being like, hey, I'm just going to throw a girl around, be an absolute asshole, but then I'm going to sit by a campfire and talk with Manji and just say, hey, I'm hunting these guys too, let's be partners. And I'm like, this can't go over well, right? Like, either someone's gonna get hurt, someone's gonna get assaulted, either verbally or physically. Like, this can't go over well, right? And then they transition to once again another simple eating scene, and they're like, okay, well, they're eating boar, and I'm like, I guess this is just how we're gonna end the episode. We're gonna have the uncertainty of what this character is going to represent, and then they finally show us their true cards, and I really like this moment. Definitely a close second with the whole death of the prostitute and just, you know, her story overall. Just the transition of colors, and like, it's almost like neon, and they're just really warping colors and, you know, hues and saturations to make it feel like we're on an acid trip, right? And we just see that wasn't boar, it was basically a puppy. What was the point? What was the point for this man just to say, I guess all women are the same? Like, why did he feed her that? Like, I just don't get it. I just really don't get it, but it really highlights just how messed up he is, that he gets off on simple pleasure of hurting others and making them vomit from what they ate because they thought it was something else. Like, it doesn't matter if she thought it tasted tasty. Like, clearly she didn't want to eat this damn dog. Like, why? What was the point of that? And I love that reaction of me just being dumbfounded of what this man represents, what he's truly going to do to the characters. Is he actually going to tag along after being that messed up? Or is Manji going to cut his head off? Like, I don't know what they want to do here, and that's a really fun feeling. I mean, this episode was a lot different. It was like very like skimming through the pages, looking at a bunch of different characters killing, and then we kind of fully stop, read a full chapter with Taito, and you're like, okay, this is really solid content. At least I know I thought it was, and I was like, yes, this is Blade of the Immortal, back on track. Pacing feels a lot more structured and just tight overall. And then, like, why are we watching them eating? To then, okay, I see why we were watching them eating for 5 minutes there. To me, it's like, this was such a different feeling episode of Blade of the Immortal. There's definitely a lot of familiarity to the atrocities and the blood and just the more personal touches, even to characters we may perceive as villains or not so righteous, but this is Blade of the Immortal. A lot of these characters aren't so righteous, our central leads included. So I really like just feeling we were getting a new perspective, a new outlook on this series, and then just being dumbfounded of why is this character here and why is he getting off on this girl eating food she didn't want to eat? Like, why? What's the point of this? What are you doing? And it was like, that's Blade of the Immortal. Blade of the Immortal is such a weird series in the best possible sense. It tells so many interesting stories, brings up so many new ideas. The presentation, even though it may not be the masses' love and what they want to see, I really like the artistic direction they take, especially seen by that flipping of colors. Beautiful touch, and it really got us to feel as if we were Rin, just wanting to throw up as if our head was going dizzy and we wanted to pass out. This series is just such a wild card in my opinion, in the best possible sense. I never really know what I'm going to get into week by week. I usually know it's going to be a new story, probably a perspective of some sort, either with our central or our antagonist, but still, it's like, you don't exactly know where the story wants to go, and this was the most off feeling, with only the first third feeling off-putting in a bad sense. The rest of the episode felt a lot more tight and structured, and I like that a whole lot. I mean, I'm sure this will be no different, probably will get even more criticism than past episodes, or maybe this will be the most hyped up episode. I have no idea, because I'm not the main opinion for Blade of the Immortal. I really like this show and not a lot of people do. However, it feels as if Blade of the Immortal is really wanting to tell things in a non-linear fashion, not what you're typically used to with anime, and I do appreciate that, because I'm all about the artistic direction. I'm all about those series that kind of push what an anime can look like, can feel like with its directing, and feel a lot more classical with just its presentation. I mean, anime by general doesn't move a whole lot. Most of the time, you are just looking at mouth flaps. That's true for most series. Move an elbow or something to make it look like they move a lot more, but this series isn't hiding its classical feel, and I do appreciate that, because when it does move, when it does shift around its colors and just its angles, it's like, it really does feel rewarding in a lot of ways, like a lot of classic anime back in the past. It definitely feels like something that I would have watched in the 90s or something, and then obviously got an HD upgrade with a Blu-ray release or something like that. But still, what are you feeling about this episode of Blade of the Immortal? Did it kind of catch you off guard like it did for me? Did you enjoy it, or was this one you're just like, okay, I don't want to see this again. Let's get more focused and back on track. Whatever you're feeling, do let me know down in the comment section below. And if you did enjoy, be sure to drop a like and also hit that subscribe button if you have any news. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.